Today's big question: you're not who you were and never will be again. Have you ever thought about how many people you've been in your lifetime? Because we've all changed so much throughout our lives, the people we used to be seem like they belong to someone else. Think about it. When you were 2, you were completely dependent on others. At 4, when you started preschool, you had to follow a bunch of new rules. At 13, puberty hit, and suddenly you were self-conscious about everything. And then at 18, you probably had a lot of existential thoughts, and probably asked yourself questions like, who am I? What do I want to do with my life? Where do I want to go to college? And then there was that awkward phase in your 20s where you were figuring out who you are, what you want to do, who you want to be. And now here you are today, older than you were yesterday, but definitely not the same. Psychologists peg this feeling of becoming someone new as a process called identity construction. It's how we build our idea of ourselves over time through our experiences, relationships, and roles. But according to some psychologists, this isn't a continuous process. Instead, it's a series of deaths. Carl Jung, one of the founders of analytical psychology, believed that we go through several cycles of death and rebirth as we grow up. He called this process individuation, which involves a series of ego deaths or a shedding of the old self. So is personal growth just a series of identity deaths? Well, Jung believed that these ego deaths were necessary for us to become our true selves. He said that our first ego death happens when we're born. We enter the world as helpless infants, totally dependent on others. Then as we grow up, we learn to assert ourselves and develop a sense of independence. This is when we form our first ego. But as we continue to grow, our first ego, or the idea of who we are, no longer serves us. Jung believed that this happens around puberty, when we start to become self-conscious and aware of how others perceive us. First ego dies, and we are forced to confront the reality that we are not the person we want to be. So we construct a new ego based on who we want to be. According to Jung, we go through several more cycles of ego death and rebirth as we grow up, each time becoming more authentically ourselves. The final ego death happens when we reach old age and have to come to terms with our mortality. As we near the end of our lives, we reflect on our accomplishments and decide whether we lived a meaningful life. If we did, then we can die content. But if we have regrets or feel like we didn't live our lives to the fullest, then we'll likely die with a sense of bitterness. So is personal growth just a series of identity deaths? Well, it depends on how you look at it. There's evidence to support Jung's theory that we go through cycles of ego death and rebirth as we grow up. For example, in a study published in the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology, researchers found that people's sense of identity became more stable and less malleable as they aged. This suggests that people go through a process of identity consolidation as they get older, which aligns with Jung's theory. Additionally, research has found that people who go through midlife transitions, such as getting divorced or retiring, often report having a strong sense of identity. Changes in life's circumstances force people to confront who they are and who they want to be, which supports Jung's idea that ego death is necessary for personal growth. But it's not all sunshine and rainbows. Research also shows that people who experience too much ego death can become psychologically stunted. For example, in a study published in the Journal of Social and Personal Relationships, researchers found that people who experienced a lot of interpersonal loss, such as the death of a spouse, were more likely to have poor mental health outcomes. So while some ego death is necessary for personal growth, too much of it can be harmful. Ultimately, the answer to today's big question depends on your perspective. If you're a fan of Jungian psychology, then you might believe that personal growth is a series of identity deaths. However, if you're more of a scientist and less of a hippie, then you might think that Jung's theory is a bit too mystical, and that there is no real evidence to support it. Regardless of where you stand, one thing is for sure: we are constantly changing. The only constant in life is change itself. So who knows? Maybe in 10 years, you'll be someone completely different. Okay, now it's time for you to answer the big question. Do you think that personal growth is a series of identity deaths? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to stay tuned for more videos like this one. Thanks for watching.